I wasn't planning to record this. I've told myself for months that saying it out loud would make it worse. But I can keep replaying it in my head without feeling like I'm going insane. Maybe if I talk, it'll sound less ridiculous. My name's Tom Reynolds. I'm 54 years old, based out of Billings, Montana. I've been driving trucks most of my adult life, since '91. I've seen just about everything the road can throw at you. Blizzards in North Dakota, drunk drivers in Wyoming, even a guy in his underwear standing in the middle of I-90 at 3 a.m. Nothing surprises me anymore, or at least that's what I used to think. This happened in late March, a little before spring really starts to show up here. It was a standard freight run, pallets of packaged goods from Missoula heading east through Miles City, then down Highway 212 toward Belle Fourche. I've driven that route 100 times. Long, empty stretches of prairie, fences that go on forever, not a single radio station worth a damn after midnight. That night was quiet. Clear sky, stars like pinholes, no moon, no wind. One of those nights where the road feels like it's yours alone. I'd fueled up at Broadus around 11, grabbed a coffee that tasted like burnt dirt, and figured I'd make Belle Fourche by 4 in the morning. Nothing unusual. Nothing strange, until about halfway between towns. You know that kind of dark where you can't tell if your headlights are even on? That's what it was like out there. The beams cut through this thick, dry blackness that didn't reflect off anything. No road signs, no fog, no dust. Just void. I was cruising steady at 80, yeah, a bit over, but that road straight as a string. The tires made that soft whine they do when everything's smooth. The cab smelled like burnt coffee and dust. I had an old country station on shuffle through my phone, but the signal had dropped to static miles back. So it was just me, the hum, and the ticking of the dash clock. That's when I noticed something out of place. A flicker, far right, low, near the white line, like movement in the ditch. I saw it for half a second and figured it was a tumbleweed, maybe a bit of debris rolling along the shoulder. Out here, wind gusts pick up everything, except there was no wind. A minute later, I caught it again. Same spot, same faint blur. I leaned forward, squinting, hand still on the wheel. Nothing, just the stretch of asphalt disappearing into black. Then maybe a mile later, it happened again, but this time, it moved. It wasn't rolling, it wasn't fluttering, it was running. I know how that sounds. Trust me, I've gone over it 1,000 times. But what I saw was a dark shape, low at first, then taller, keeping pace with the cab. Smooth, no bounce, no jitter, like it was built to move. I eased off the cruise control, dropped to 78. The motion stayed right there, locked in step with me. I stared harder, thinking maybe it was the reflection of my own trailer tires catching light, but it didn't move like that. It had rhythm. I swallowed, felt my throat go dry. I told myself, you're tired, you're imagining movement. But deep down, I knew that was a lie. The highway dipped slightly, then rose. The thing followed, matching every change in speed and angle. That's when my chest got tight. I turned my head real slow, trying not to make it obvious, even though that made no sense. The convex mirror on the passenger side showed only what the headlights touched, nothing else. But just beyond that line of light, there it was, a shape, upright now, pacing me at 80 miles an hour like it wasn't even working for it. I froze. My right hand slid down to the door lock, even though it was already down. I could feel my heartbeat in my fingertips. What the hell is that? The logical part of me kicked in first. Reflection, shadow, fatigue. Maybe my side light was hitting a post fence just right and making it look like movement. I told myself that again and again, but the part of me that lived on the road for 3 decades, the one that knows how headlights behave, how wind moves, how shadows bend, that part knew it wasn't a trick. I tapped the high beams. The light flared forward, washing the ditch and shoulder in white. For half a second I saw legs. Long, human-shaped, but moving too fast, too fluid. Then it slipped out of the light again, as if it knew where the edge was. Every instinct screamed at me to floor it, but I didn't. Drivers like me don't panic easy. We rationalize, we control. So I talked out loud. "All right, you're just seeing things, Tom. Long night, eyes playing tricks." I said it twice. Didn't help. The next sign came up. Rest area, 2 miles. I'd stopped there before, small lot, maybe 2 stalls and a bathroom shack. I decided that was it. I'd pull over, check the mirrors, maybe stretch, get air, shake this off. Those 2 miles took forever. Every few seconds I'd catch that shadow still there, never falling behind, never surging ahead, just running. When the rest area lights came into view, dim orange pools against black, I felt a wave of relief that made me dizzy. I eased into the decel lane, careful, smooth. My hands were trembling now, just a little. And that's when I realized, whatever it was slowing with me. At 60, still there. At 40, still there. The reflection moved exactly with my pace, hugging the side of the truck like it was tethered to me. My stomach dropped. I heard myself whisper, "No, no, no." By the time I rolled into the lot, my mouth was dry. The place was empty. No cars, no rigs, just 2 streetlights and the restroom hut at the far end. I parked near the curb, passenger side close to the edge. Killed the engine but left the floodlight on. For a minute I just sat there. No music, no AC, no movement, only the sound of my heart pounding in my ears. Then slowly I reached for the flashlight clipped to the dash, opened the door and stepped down into the cold. The air hit me like ice, dry, sharp, clean. I could smell the asphalt and the faint sweetness of diesel from the engine cooling. The lot stretched out empty. I swept the flashlight across the asphalt. Nothing. Then across the field beyond, flat, dead grass, silent. I turned the beam along the side of my truck. Mud streaked the lower panels, normal after a rain patch earlier that day. But one section looked different. The mud had patterns, not random spray, not wind streaks. Patterns. They ran in pairs, long ovals spaced apart like footprints, except stretched. Too long to be human, too even to be accidental. Each step cut a clean shape through the dried grime, revealing the metal underneath. I stepped closer, the gravel crunching under my boots. The pattern went from behind the cab to almost halfway down the trailer, 6, maybe 7 impressions, heel to toe, each about 14 inches long. I crouched and touched one. It was cold, dry, and rough at the edges. The mud flaked easily under my thumb, but the shape remained clean. I followed the line with the flashlight, left, right, left, a perfect rhythm. I felt something tighten in my chest, like a wire pulling. "No," I said quietly. "No, no, no." I stood up, turned the flashlight off, and just listened. At first, nothing. Then, a soft scrape, right behind the passenger door. Not loud, just the sound of something brushing the curb. I froze. The flashlight was still in my hand, but I didn't turn it on. I didn't want to. The scrape came again, slow, deliberate. Then silence. My legs moved before my brain decided to. I climbed back into the cab, slammed the door, and locked it. I sat there in the dark, breathing like I'd run a mile. The only sound was the faint tick of cooling metal and the blood rushing in my ears. I don't know how long I sat like that. 5 minutes, maybe 10. Eventually I turned the key halfway, letting the dash lights flicker on. The cab filled with the low hum of electronics. I reached for my Dashcam. I'd had it running the whole time, like always. Maybe it caught something. I scrolled through the playback. For a while it was just black road, endless white lines. Then, at around 2:11 a.m., something moved. It was small at first, near the edge of the frame. Then a blur. Low, fast, parallel to the truck. 2 seconds, that's all. But those 2 seconds made my stomach drop all over again. Because in that blur, you could see it wasn't an animal. The motion was too consistent. too upright. Something was running there. I played it again and again. The pixels broke apart, but the shape stayed. I couldn't trick myself into unseeing it. I turned off the screen, sat in silence again. I knew what the logical answer was: reflections, low light, fatigue. I've driven through hallucinations before, shadows that look like deer, fence posts that seem to move. You blink and they're gone. But this wasn't gone. It had followed me off the highway, slowed when I slowed, left marks that didn't wash off with reason. I started the engine again just to break the silence. The rumble calmed me a bit. I flicked on the floodlight outside and stared at the side of the truck through the passenger window. The prints were still there, clear as before, each one too long, too neat. That was enough. I wasn't going to stay. I put it in gear and rolled out of the lot, the sound of the tires echoing off the empty concrete. As I pulled back onto the highway, I checked the right mirror once. Nothing. Just darkness. I didn't look again for 10 miles. When I finally did, it was clean. But I didn't feel clean. By the time I reached Belle Fourche, the sky was starting to lighten behind me. The clock said 4:27 a.m. I'd been awake close to 22 hours. I felt hollow. I pulled into a truck stop on the edge of town. Not one of the big chains, just a mom-and-pop place with cracked concrete, half the lights burned out, and a faded sign that said, "Eat here or starve." I parked under a light that barely worked. The fluorescent tube buzzed and flickered like it was dying. I left the engine idling and just sat there a moment, staring at the windshield. It was smeared with bug guts and road dust, but I could still see my reflection faintly in the glass. I looked like hell. I told myself, "You're done. You've been up too long. Sleep, unload, forget." But forgetting doesn't come easy when you know you saw something that shouldn't exist. I forced myself out of the cab. The morning air was cold, crisp, still. The smell of diesel and fryer grease drifted from the diner next to the pumps. I grabbed a rag from the side box, just to check, to make sure the marks were really gone. They weren't. Even under daylight, the side panel of the cab had faint outlines, long scuffs, as if something had brushed against the metal while keeping perfect pace. Not deep enough to scratch the paint, but enough to dull the finish in streaks. That detail broke any remaining logic I had. Because you don't get parallel scuffs from road debris, not that high up, not that consistent. I wiped the panel again, harder, until my arm hurt. The lines stayed. A driver 2 spots over looked at me like I was nuts. I waved a tired morning at him, and he nodded back, probably thinking I was just another sleep-deprived trucker cleaning bugs off chrome. Inside the diner, the world felt too normal. A few locals drinking coffee, country music low in the background. The waitress asked if I wanted the breakfast special. I said sure, even though I wasn't hungry. While I sat there staring at my plate, I realized my hands were still shaking. Not a lot, just enough that the coffee rippled in the cup. I kept thinking about that footage, those 2 seconds. I wanted to believe it was a trick of compression, a glitch. But I've seen hundreds of hours of dashcam recordings. I know the difference between video noise and motion. That shape had rhythm, intent, and the way it stayed just out of the light. That's what got me. Like it knew where I couldn't see. When I finished my coffee, I paid, left a few bucks on the table, and stepped outside. The sun was up now, washing the horizon in that pale yellow Montana light. The wind had picked up, stirring the flags by the pumps. I stood there a while, watching the highway stretch back west. The same road I'd driven through just hours earlier, the same one that had felt endless and empty. Part of me wanted to go back right then, not because I wanted to see it again, God no, but because I needed to know it was gone, that it was just one bad night. But I didn't. I drove to my drop-off, signed the paperwork, and pretended everything was fine. I told myself I'd sleep it off and laugh about it in a week. I didn't. I spent the next 2 nights in a motel outside Billings. Cheap place, old carpet, buzzing fridge, curtains that don't close all the way. I left the TV on while I tried to rest, but it didn't help. Every time a shadow crossed the screen, I'd flinch. When I finally fell asleep, I dreamed of running. Not of being chased, of running beside something, hearing its breath match mine, feeling it in the corner of my eye but never being able to turn my head. I woke up drenched in sweat, heart hammering like I'd sprinted a mile. That morning I made a decision. I told myself I'd drive that same stretch again in daylight. No tricks, no fear, just to see. I left just before noon, empty trailer, full tank. The sun was high, the sky clean. I turned off the radio and let the tires hum. When I hit the familiar section, flat, open, not a curve in sight, I slowed down to 50 and pulled onto the shoulder. Everything looked normal, just miles of grass and dirt, a few broken fence posts, tire scraps in the ditch, nothing strange. I walked along the edge of the road for a minute, scanning for footprints or any sign of what I'd seen. Nothing. The ground was hard, dry. No impressions, no tracks. That should have calmed me. It didn't. I climbed back into the cab and sat there with the engine idling. The steering wheel felt cold. I whispered, "You imagined it. It was nothing." But it didn't feel like nothing. It felt like the kind of thing that only exists when you re-alone long enough to notice what hiding between the seconds. I drove home slow. Didn't go above 60. Every car that passed in the opposite lane made me tense. I kept checking the passenger mirror even when I knew there was nothing there. When I got home that evening, my girlfriend asked if I was all right. I told her I was just tired. She said I looked pale. I said maybe I was catching something. I didn't tell her about the marks, or the footage, or the sound, because how do you explain something like that to someone who still believes the world makes sense? Weeks went by. I stayed off night runs for a while, told dispatch I needed to reset my schedule. They didn't argue. 54-year-old drivers don't get questioned when they ask for daylight routes, but habits die slow. Eventually, I took another late haul. Different highway, different state. It was fine at first. Then around midnight, I caught myself glancing at the right mirror again. The road was empty. The beam clean, nothing there. Still, my chest tightened the same way it had that night on 212. I turned on the passenger floodlight for a few seconds. White glare spilled over the shoulder, showing only gravel and brush. I shut it off quick. The darkness felt safer. That cheese when I realized something I hadn't before. It wasn't what I saw that scared me. It was the possibility that it could happen again. That whatever had been there might not be a thing you can leave behind on a map. 2 months later, I finally pulled the memory card from the Dashcam. I told myself I'd delete it. I didn't need to keep that kind of poison in my head, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I watched it one last time in my living room, lights off, volume low. The recording looked worse than I remembered. Grainy, low contrast, nothing sharp, and yet when that blur appeared for those 2 seconds, I paused it. Frame by frame, I stepped through. There, just for a single frame, you could make out the shape of a head, shoulders, legs, mid-stride, human proportions, but longer. The body leaned forward in a way no runner could sustain. The stride was unnatural, like it didn't need to touch the ground to move. And in that same frame, I saw something else, reflected in the chrome edge of the passenger mirror, barely visible, a suggestion of fingers. Long, thin, brushing the air inches from the metal. I shut the laptop, sat there in the dark for a long time. The next morning, I deleted the file, but not before transferring it to a USB drive and locking it in the glove compartment of my truck. I told myself it was for proof, just in case I ever needed it. But I think it's more like an anchor, something to remind me that it was real, that I'm not losing my mind. It's been months now. I still drive. Every time I pass an exit that leads toward it, I feel my stomach twist. I keep both doors locked now, even while moving. I keep the passenger floodlight on longer than I should, and I check that right mirror more times than I want to admit. Some nights, when the road's empty and the hum of the tires hits that steady drone, I almost forget. Then something flickers at the edge of my vision. A fence post, a shadow, and my hand tightens on the wheel. I don't speed anymore. I don't need to. Because out there, where the world gets quiet enough, speed doesn't mean safety. You can't outrun what keeps pace with you. I've told myself 100 explanations. Fatigue, stress, reflection, bad lighting. But every time I try to settle on one, my mind goes back to those prints in the mud. The way they followed a perfect stride. The way they stopped halfway down the cab, as if whatever made them decided that was close enough. And the sound. That soft scrape against the curb. 3 steps, then silence. That's the part that doesn't fade. It is like a heartbeat you can still hear long after the pulse is gone. I think about it more than I want to. When I wake up in the sleeper and the wind shifts just right, I swear I can hear that same rhythm outside the truck. Not loud, not near, just far enough that I can't prove it's there. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's still out there. Either way, I've stopped trying to figure it out. I'm tired. I've been tired since that night. I just keep driving, watching the mirrors, waiting for the road to give me something normal again. If you've ever spent enough time alone out there, you know what I mean. How the world starts to whisper back. That's all I can say about it. I wish I could forget, but I can't. If you made it this far, thank you for listening. Please like, share, and subscribe to Mr. EBON for more real horror stories like this. Trust me, there's more out there than you think.